He was the retiring CEO of a concrete empire, a man whose children saw his legacy as a balance sheet to be divided. She was a young florist, whose small shop was about to be crushed by the very empire he had built. He entered her shop one last time, seeking a simple flower to honor a fading memory. But what she gave him instead, with a quiet act of grace, was a reason to build one last thing, not with steel, but with kindness. Arthur Pendleton, at 68, moved through the world with the quiet authority of a man who had built cities. The Pendleton Group's logo, a stylized P that looked like a skyscraper's blueprint, was etched onto skylines across the country. But as he sat in the sterile, soundproofed boardroom, he felt less like an architect of empires and more like a ghost haunting his own creation. His son, Conrad, was presenting Q3 projections, his voice a slick, confident monotone that spoke of profit margins and asset liquidation. His daughter, Beatrice, sat opposite, her gaze sharp and appraising, not on the data, but on her father, as if measuring him for his coffin. They were vultures in bespoke suits, waiting for him to finally step aside so they could pick his legacy clean. They had his ambition, but none of his soul. The soul he had long ago buried with his wife, Eleanor. "We've identified several underperforming assets in the Apex portfolio," Conrad was saying, pointing to a line item on the screen. "A block of retail spaces in the warehouse district, low yield, high maintenance. I recommend we terminate the leases and sell to developers." Arthur didn't respond. That block. He knew it. It was where Eleanor had grown up, a place of brick facades and struggling small businesses, a place with history. To Conrad, it was just a number. "Dad, are you with us?" Beatrice asked, her voice laced with impatient concern. Arthur pushed his chair back, the sound echoing in the cavernous room. "The meeting is over. I need some air." He left without another word, ignoring their shared look of frustration. He didn't take the chauffeured car. He walked. The city air was crisp with the promise of autumn, but Arthur felt a winter in his bones. He walked for miles, his feet carrying him to a part of the city he hadn't visited in years, the warehouse district. And there it was, petal and stem, a tiny flower shop tucked between a dusty bookstore and a closed-down diner. It was the only splash of color on the block. Buckets of sunflowers and lavender spilled onto the sidewalk. Through the window, he could see a young woman inside, her brow furrowed in concentration as she wrapped a bouquet with gentle, precise hands. He had been coming here for a year, anonymously. Every Tuesday, he would buy a single white gardenia, Eleanor's favorite, and place it in the small vase on his desk. The girl behind the counter never asked questions. She just smiled, a quiet, genuine smile that seemed out of place in his transactional world. Today was different. It was the anniversary of Eleanor's passing, the day the world had lost its color. He pushed the door open, a small bell chiming his arrival. The scent of damp earth and fresh blooms washed over him, a scent of life in a day filled with death. The young woman, Maya, looked up. Her eyes, a warm hazel, held a natural empathy. "The usual, Mr. A?" she asked softly. She didn't know his name, only the initial he'd given her on his first visit. He simply nodded, his throat too tight to speak. She moved to the cooler, but then paused. She had noticed the profound sadness in his eyes, the way his shoulders stooped with a weight he usually hid so well. Instead of pulling out a single gardenia, she took a different path. She selected a few stems, the white gardenia, a sprig of delicate blue forget-me-nots, and a single, deep red rose. She wrapped them in simple brown paper, tied with a piece of twine. When she held it out to him, he reached for his wallet. "No," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Not today. This one is a gift, for whatever memory you're holding on to. Some things shouldn't have a price tag." He froze, his hand hovering over his coat. A gift. In his world, nothing was a gift. Everything was a transaction, an investment, a negotiation. He stared at the small, perfect bouquet, the gardenia for Eleanor's grace, the rose for his enduring love, and the forget-me-nots, a promise that he wouldn't. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. He saw the faint smudges of dirt under her nacre fingernails, the weariness in her young face, but also the unwavering kindness in her eyes. It was a kindness he hadn't encountered in decades. "Thank you," he managed to say, his voice thick with an emotion he had long since suppressed. He took the bouquet and walked out, the bell chiming his departure. As he stood on the sidewalk, the city noise faded away. He looked at the flowers in his hand, and then back at the small shop, a fragile beacon of beauty on a block his son wanted to erase. In that moment, Arthur Pendleton, a man who had retired from life, felt a spark, a fierce, protective, and dangerous spark. He wasn't done building after all.
The bouquet sat on Arthur's desk, a vibrant defiance to the cold glass and steel of his office. For the first time in years, the room didn't feel like a mausoleum. He spent the rest of the day not reviewing portfolios, but thinking about a young woman who gave away flowers because she understood the currency of memory. He made a call, not to his son, but to the head of his real estate division. "Get me the full file on the Apex portfolio, specifically the retail block in the warehouse district," he commanded. "And I want it done quietly." The file arrived within the hour. As he read, the cold knot in his stomach tightened into a fist of ice. Apex Properties, a subsidiary the Pendleton Group had acquired in a recent merger, was managing the block with ruthless efficiency. The plan Conrad had presented wasn't just a recommendation, it was already in motion. Rent had been tripled across the board, a tactic designed to force out the existing tenants. Petal and Stem was at the top of the list, its lease set to be terminated in 30 days. He was the monster at her door. His company, his name, was the faceless corporation about to destroy the one beautiful thing he had found. The irony was so bitter it almost made him laugh. He couldn't just call it off. Conrad and Beatrice would see it as a sign of his sentimentality, of his failing judgment. They were already looking for an excuse to push the board to vote him into a purely ceremonial role. He needed to understand the situation from the inside, to see the rot in his own company for himself. The next day, Arthur Pendleton, CEO, vanished. In his place was Arthur, a retired widower with a kind face and a lot of time on his hands. He wore a simple tweed jacket and walking shoes, a stark contrast to his usual tailored armor. He went back to the flower shop, this time with no anniversary to mark, only a quiet mission. Maya was there, a smudge of pollen on her cheek. She smiled when she saw him. "Back so soon? I hope the flowers helped." "They did more than you know," he said, his voice genuine. He bought a small potted orchid, something that required care, something that would last. He lingered, asking her about the different flowers, about the business. "It's been hard lately," she admitted, her voice dropping. "The new landlords are aggressive. The rent is impossible. I don't know how much longer I can hold on." "This shop seems to mean a lot to you," he said, probing gently. "It was my mother's dream," Maya confessed, her eyes drifting to a faded photo behind the counter. "I used this place to keep her memory alive. It's all I have of her." Her words struck him with the force of a physical blow. She was just like him, tending to a legacy, trying to keep a memory from fading. But while he had billions, she had only this small, fragile shop. Over the next 2 weeks, Art became a regular fixture at Petal and Stem. He'd bring coffee, sit on a stool in the corner, and just talk with her. He learned about her abandoned studies in botany, her intricate knowledge of floral arrangement, her dream of one day starting a community garden for the neighborhood kids. She, in turn, found a quiet comfort in his presence. He was a grandfatherly figure, a patient listener who never offered unsolicited advice, who just seemed to understand the weight she was carrying. Meanwhile, at Pendleton Group, CEO Arthur Pendleton was a ghost, communicating only through terse emails, canceling meetings, and sowing confusion. Conrad and Beatrice were growing more agitated. "What is he doing?" Conrad fumed during a private call with his sister. "He's been seen walking around the warehouse district. He's losing his mind. This is our chance, B. We need to accelerate the Apex liquidation. Show the board we're the ones making the tough, profitable decisions." Arthur, through his quiet channels, was learning just how deep the rot went. The man in charge of the Apex subsidiary, a bulldog of a manager named Garrett Shaw, was operating on a bonus structure tied directly to how quickly he could clear the properties. He was using intimidation tactics, cutting off utilities for repairs, and burying tenants in legal paperwork. He was a corporate predator, and Arthur had been signing his paychecks. One afternoon, Arthur was at the shop when Garrett Shaw himself walked in. He didn't see Arthur in the corner. He strode to the counter, a clipboard in his hand, his presence sucking the warmth from the room. "Maya Jensen?" he asked, his tone dripping with impatience. "Yes? I'm Garrett Shaw from Apex Properties. This is your final notice. You have 10 days to vacate the premises. We have a demolition crew scheduled." Maya's face went white. 10 days, but my lease is a document I can shred for fun, he sneered. Your mother signed a 30-day termination clause. It's ironclad. The fact that our predecessors were too sentimental to enforce it is not my problem. Pack your flowers, little girl. The bulldozers are coming. He slapped the notice on the counter and turned to leave. As he did, his eyes met Arthur's. There was a flicker of recognition, a moment of confusion. He'd seen Arthur's face in company reports, in the lobby portraits. But here, in this rundown shop, dressed like a pensioner, it didn't compute. He dismissed it as a trick of the light and strode out. Maya stood frozen, her hand resting on the eviction notice, her eyes wide with disbelief and despair. She looked over at Arthur, her face crumpling. "I'm losing it, Art! I'm losing everything!" Arthur stood up, the tweed jacket suddenly feeling like a costume. The game was over. The quiet observer had to act. He walked over to her, his expression a mask of cold fury she had never seen before. "No, you're not," he said, his voice no longer the gentle tone of a retired old man, but the resonant, commanding voice of a CEO. "You are not losing anything. He is."
Maya stared at him, bewildered by the sudden transformation. The gentle, grandfatherly man she had shared coffee with was gone. In his place stood someone radiating an authority that was as chilling as it was comforting. His eyes, usually soft with a quiet sadness, now held a glint of steel. "What do you mean?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Arthur placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "That man, Garrett Shaw, he works for me. Apex Properties. It's one of my companies." The blood drained from Maya's face. She took a step back, the betrayal a sharp, cold sting. You own the company that's kicking me out? Have you been playing with me this whole time? Is this some kind of cruel joke?" "No, Maya," he said, his voice softening, the command replaced by a deep regret. "It's a tragedy of errors. I didn't know. I didn't know what my own company was doing in the dark. I didn't know until you showed me the light." He explained everything. His children's greed, his discovery of the eviction plan, his decision to understand the problem from her perspective. He didn't make excuses. He laid the truth bare. I am the faceless corporation, Maya, and I am ashamed. But I am also the only one who can stop this, and I will. She searched his face, seeing not deception, but a profound and weary honesty. The anger in her chest slowly gave way to a dawning, unbelievable hope. That evening, Arthur Pendleton returned to his throne. He called an emergency board meeting for the following morning. The summons, sent at 10 p.m., sent a shockwave through the company. Conrad and Beatrice were furious. An emergency meeting? What is he playing at? Beatrice hissed over the phone to her brother. He's going to announce his full retirement. It has to be. He's finally cracking. Good, Conrad replied, a predatory gleam in his voice. We'll be there to pick up the pieces. The next morning, the boardroom was electric with tension. The entire board was assembled, along with Conrad, Beatrice, and a very confused Garrett Shaw, who had been summoned without an explanation. Arthur sat at the head of the table, not in his usual suit, but in the same tweed jacket he'd worn at the flower shop. The bouquet Maya had given him, now perfectly preserved, sat in the center of the vast mahogany table, a silent testament to the meeting's true purpose. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Arthur began, his voice calm and measured. "For the past few years, I have been disengaged. I allowed this company to run on the inertia of profit, and I lost sight of the principles on which I built it. I have allowed a culture of rapacious, short-sighted greed to fester in the halls of my own creation, and I am here today to correct that." He looked directly at his children. Their confident smirks began to falter. "Yesterday, a notice of eviction was served to a small business owner on a property owned by our subsidiary, Apex. The manager of that subsidiary, Mr. Shaw, is here with us." He gestured to Garrett, who shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Mr. Shaw, could you please explain to the board the strategic value in terminating the lease of a flower shop that is the sole source of income for a young woman supporting herself and the memory of her family?" Garrett, caught off guard, stammered. It's an underperforming asset, sir. The entire block is. My mandate was to maximize returns." "Your mandate, Mr. Shaw, was to manage properties, not to destroy lives for a bonus," Arthur cut him off, his voice like ice. "Your employment at this company is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Garrett's face went white. Two security guards, who had been waiting discreetly by the door, stepped forward. As they led him away, Arthur's gaze fell on his son. "This mandate, it was approved by you, wasn't it, Conrad, as part of the Apex liquidation strategy?" "Dad, it was a sound business decision. That block is a goldmine for redevelopment." "It's a community," Arthur countered, his voice rising with a passion the board hadn't heard in years. "It's a young woman's dream. It's the place my late wife grew up. Did that ever appear in your profit and loss statements?" He stood up, his presence filling the room. "This company has lost its way. It has become a machine that values concrete over character, and that ends today." Then he did something no one expected. He walked to the door and opened it. Maya was standing there, her hands clasped in front of her, her face pale but resolute. Arthur had called her that morning and asked her to come, not as a victim, but as a witness. "Everyone," Arthur said, his voice softening as he guided her into the room. "This is Maya Jensen, the owner of Petal and Stem. She is also the kind of person this company should be supporting, not destroying." Conrad and Beatrice stared at her, then at their father, the full scope of his rebellion finally dawning on them. This wasn't about a flower shop. This was a coup. The boardroom was utterly silent. The assembled members,
Men and women accustomed to the predictable rhythms of corporate power plays watched the scene unfold with a mixture of shock and fascination. Maya stood beside Arthur, a small, determined figure in a sea of expensive suits. She met the curious and hostile stares with a quiet dignity that was more powerful than any shout. Beatrice was the first to speak, her voice dripping with condescending disbelief. "Father, what is this? You brought a shopkeeper to a board meeting? Have you lost your senses? This is a private, corporate matter." "This," Arthur said, placing a protective hand on Maya's shoulder, "is the most important matter this company will ever discuss. This is about our soul." He turned to the board. "For 20 years I have steered this ship. We have built an empire. We have made you all very wealthy. But I ask you today, what is the purpose of an empire if it is built on the ruins of people's dreams?" He picked up a folder from the table. "I am not retiring. I am re-engaging, and my first act as a re-engaged CEO is to announce a new direction for the Pendleton Group. We are launching the Eleanor's Garden Initiative, a new division of this company dedicated to community renewal." He looked directly at Maya. "The initiative will identify and invest in small, local businesses that are the heart of their communities. We will not be their landlords, we will be their partners. We will provide financial support, strategic guidance, and long-term, stable leases. Our goal will not be to maximize profit, but to cultivate sustainable, vibrant communities. And the first project, the pilot for this entire initiative, will be the revitalization of the Warehouse District block." Conrad leaped to his feet. "This is insane! It's a charity, not a business. You'll tank the stock price. The shareholders will revolt." "The shareholders," Arthur said with a cold smile, "will be reminded that I still hold a 51% controlling stake in this company. They will do as I say." He then turned his steely gaze upon his children. "As for you two, your vision for this company is fundamentally incompatible with mine. Your ambition has curdled into a rot that I can no longer tolerate. Therefore, I am removing you both from the executive board." The gasps in the room were audible. Conrad and Beatrice stared at him, their faces a mixture of fury and utter shock. "You can't do that!" Beatrice cried. "I can and I have," Arthur said calmly. "You will retain your shares. You will be very wealthy for the rest of your lives, but you will have no say in the running of this company. Your influence ends today. The legacy of the Pendleton Group will be one of creation, not destruction." He then looked at Maya, his expression softening completely. "And to ensure this initiative is guided by the right principles, its director will be someone who understands its mission better than anyone else. I am appointing Maya Jensen as the executive director of the Eleanor's Garden Initiative." If the room was shocked before, it was utterly stunned now. Maya's own heart felt like it had stopped. Director? Her? A florist who was days away from being homeless? I don't know anything about running a corporate division," she stammered, looking at Arthur. "You know how to care," he said simply. "You know how to see people. The rest, I will teach you. You will have the full resources of this company at your disposal. You will report directly to me." Conrad, his face purple with rage, pointed a shaking finger at Maya. "Her? You're giving my position, my birthright, to her?" "She has more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire body," Arthur said, his voice flat and final. "She earned it. She passed a test you both failed spectacularly, the test of character." He turned back to the stunned board. "This is the new Pendleton Group. We will measure our success not just by the height of our buildings, but by the strength of the communities at their feet.
The meeting is adjourned. Conrad and Beatrice were left standing there, stripped of their power, as the board members began to file out, whispering amongst themselves. Maya stood beside Arthur, feeling as though she had been swept up in a hurricane. He had not just saved her shop. He had handed her a new life, a new purpose, and a chance to build something beautiful on a scale she had never imagined. As they walked out of the boardroom, leaving his sputtering children in their wake, Arthur paused. He looked down at Maya, a genuine, warm smile finally reaching his eyes. "Well, Director Jensen," he said, the formal title sounding playful, "I believe our first order of business is to renegotiate your lease. How does $1 a year for the next 99 years sound?" Maya laughed, a real full-throated laugh of disbelief and joy. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't look like a struggle. It looked like a garden waiting to be planted.
The transformation of the warehouse district block was a quiet miracle. It didn't happen with bulldozers and cranes, but with paintbrushes, wheelbarrows, and a community rediscovering its own strength. Under Maya's leadership, the Eleanor's Garden Initiative became a beacon of hope. The vacant storefronts were not sold to developers, but were offered at subsidized rates to local artisans, a baker, and a family-run bookstore. Maya's shop, Petal and Stem, became the vibrant heart of the revitalized block. With a stable future and a new sense of purpose, she expanded. She hired 2 local teenagers, teaching them the art of floral design. She started a program with the bookstore to host poetry readings among the flowers. Her small shop became a community hub, a place where people gathered not just to buy things, but to connect. Arthur was her silent partner, her mentor, and her closest friend. He had officially stepped back from the day-to-day running of the main corporation, leaving that to a new, hand-picked executive team that shared his vision. His days were now spent with Maya. He'd sit in her shop, a cup of tea in his hand, and help her with the accounting. His brilliant financial mind now dedicated to calculating the profit margins on roses versus tulips. He found more joy in that simple task than he had in any multi-billion-dollar merger. They became an unlikely but inseparable pair, the aging tycoon and the young florist. They would walk through the city, Arthur pointing out the architectural details of the buildings he had built, Maya pointing out the resilient wildflowers growing in the cracks of the pavement. He taught her about business, about leverage and strategy. She taught him about patience, about the quiet power of growth, and about how to see the world in color again. His relationship with his children was fractured, perhaps permanently. They communicated only through lawyers. They had their wealth, but they were exiles from his life, a life that was now richer and more meaningful than it had ever been. He had found in Maya the daughter of his heart, the heir not to his fortune, but to his soul. One crisp autumn evening, a year after the board meeting that had changed everything, Arthur and Maya stood on the rooftop of the newly renovated community center on the block. They had transformed the roof into a lush garden, a green oasis in the heart of the concrete jungle, open to all the residents of the neighborhood. Below them, the street was alive with light and laughter. The block was hosting its first annual Harvest Festival, an event Maya had organized. "Look at what you've built," Arthur said quietly, his gaze sweeping over the scene below. "What we've built," she corrected, smiling up at him. Her face was no longer etched with the weariness of struggle. It glowed with a quiet confidence. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked softly. "Giving up so much control? Turning your back on your own children?" He looked out at the skyline, at the towering monuments to his own ambition. Then his gaze returned to the small, thriving street below,
to the faces of the people laughing, to the warm glow coming from the window of her flower shop. "I didn't give anything up, Maya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I traded an empty empire for a full life. It's the most profitable deal I ever made." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. It wasn't a ring. He opened it to reveal an intricately crafted gold key, a replica of the one to her shop. "This is the key to the whole initiative. It's yours now. I'm officially retiring. The future of this company's soul is in your hands." Tears welled in Maya's eyes as she took the key. "I won't let you down, Arthur." "You never could," he whispered. They stood there in the quiet of the rooftop garden, the sounds of the festival drifting up to them, two souls from different worlds who had found in each other a shared purpose and a family of their own making. He had been a king who had forgotten how to rule, and she had been the humble gardener who had reminded him what was worth growing. If this story reminded you that a legacy is not what we leave for people, but what we leave in people, and that the greatest strength can be found in the quietest acts of kindness, then we invite you to be part of our community. Subscribe to CEO Stories Uncovered for more tales that celebrate the enduring power of the human spirit. Like, share, and comment to let us know how this story touched you. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a reminder that it's never too late to plant a new garden. Thank you for watching.